ladies and gentlemen, welcome to RLAfterShock, the longest-running independent podcast for everything that is Rocket League esports in the European scene. I am the Eternal J, as usual, joined by Digital Bacon. I was going to make a Spanish joke, as in, like, try and say the European scene in Spanish, but I completely forgot how to say it. Just immediately escaped in my head. Jesus.
Es European scene? I don't know. You just keep adding E's onto the end of things. That's just how you get away with fake speaking French. Right? Or so I've been told.
Honestly, you'd think after we took a trip to Valencia, you would think that we'd actually have experience in this respect, but we have no idea. So there you go. But yeah, no, obviously, the build-up to the World Championship is just around the corner here, Bacon. We have only a week to go. Less than that. Well, actually, a little bit over that. I mean, less than that for us. Obviously, we're flying out on the Wednesday. As all of us have got an Airbnb together. We're going to spend a week out there. It's going to be really, really fun. And again, you know, just the build-up to the World Championship has left a lot of people really, really hyped. A bit of a lull in sort of like a lot of the news and the general goings-on in the scene. But still a couple tournaments. One tournament in particular we want to cover here, Bacon. And we've got a bit of a jam-packed show for you today as well, haven't we?
Oh, yeah, definitely. We've got so much going on in the back ends because, of course, we just had a big weekend. So some stuff is coming out the woodworks and excited to share that with you, of course. And, of course, our feature today, which we're going to get quite personal on, I think, and give impressions and such.
Yes, as our main feature for today's Talking Topics is going to be all about casting in the RLCS and RLRS. Obviously, a couple of threads went up on Reddit this past weekend after the back of the promotion tournament. So we definitely want to talk about that, since obviously it's a subject close to my heart. It's a close subject close to Bacon, so obviously us being casters as well. Yep. But as well as that, we also have the results from the Rocket League Championship Series promotional playoffs, including some trouble in the complexity camp, but I think we got an exclusive little bit of insider information that we're going to share with you today. So you definitely want to be around here for the 54th episode of RLAfterShock. Actually, you know what? I think that's where we'll start, Bacon. The news, where Flakes, obviously, recently relegated from the Championship Series to the Rocket League Rival Series, obviously with the complexity lineup, once again back down there in the second-tier division. And unfortunately, he's under fire, not for losing, but, of course, for this little tweet that we have up on your screens right now. This is a little bit of a back and forth between Flakes and Yukio. Obviously, Yukio being Dignitas's recent addition. I mean, I say recent as in the sense that he's the newest guy to as like from a very long time ago. Not even that, actually. No, scratch that. I'm being an idiot because Astral's the latest addition from a few months ago. But bottom line is that Yukio, obviously part of Dignitas, has had this little question he asked to Flakes. Why Merc? He was playing with the Merc in the promotional playoff tournament, and Flakes obviously responding in the middle of the series, got some flack from Farah saying it'd be great if you start showing respect to your team by focusing on one of the most important series instead of answering to people on Twitter over an already questionable card choice. To which Flakes fires back, and I still can't believe this is actually a fucking thing. Like, most players would just go silent after this, but Flakes, nah, just full big dick energy. We get 1 full minute in between the games, man. I see BA staring at the screen. Like, holy shit, your hubris is gonna be massive, dude.
It just, for me, it just feels like there's not any professionalism to this lad. And this was one thing I can remember way back, when he for the first 2 years of the game, whatever, was playing under the name Pornflakes, wasn't it? After, Joke Pitch or whatever and all of that sort of jazz. And I can remember way back then, 2016 sort of times going, dude needs to lose that first part to his name just instantly because no one is going to pick him up. No orgs will pick that up because naturally the nature of it. He loses that. Good. Starts playing with bigger teams once again and gets picked up. And you're like, okay, so this guy's changed. He's grown up, matured. He's now 17, when he's joining all of that. And then suddenly, way back when it all started to come out woodworks that it can be a bit of an arsehat, should we say. What with the original complexity drama back in, what was that, August or September?
I mean, look, right, at the end of the day, I think they kind of, we thought that they moved past that particular phase in their particular lifetime. Apparently not, since, Complexity's line and formation over the course of the entire season has been plagued with mistrust and misaccuracy, particularly between Flakes and Greasy, who Flakes believed Greasy was the man should have been the man to leave that lineup. Obviously, I still think we kind of agree in that respect. But for Flakes, like, come on, dude. Like, this is not winner's mentality right here. Like, if you have a minute between games, you should not be on Twitter chatting shit about America or answering people's questions. It's as Farrah says, you should respect your teammates and try and find a way to win. It's like, sort of like, I think I heard a quote from, I can't remember who it was, but they talk about how boxers often think and how they often, like, their mentality in the middle of a boxing match, and they're always trying to figure out some sort of right hook, some sort of like gap in the sort of the opponent's defensive or their opponent in general, that they can try and just nip a little knockout in right there and then. It's a champion's mentality to try and figure out that one sort of way in, even if you're on the back foot, even if you're like Complexity were in this case down by several games in a series, trying to figure out how to get back into the series as a whole. You need to be like that for like every single second. So like in between games, the perfect chance to talk that through with a coach, with your teammates, and so on and so forth. But Flakes is out here fucking spitting shit on Twitter, which has to be one of the most ridiculous things I think I've ever seen from an RLCS player. Like, it is bluey levels of hubris. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, and you look at that, and it's that case of, don't get me wrong, I like a bad guy within, the scene. I like
Here's the thing, right? There's a difference between Marky Dudar, bad guy, and Flakes, bad guy. Like, you remember Marky when he did that Season 3 VT? He was obviously chatting shit about all the North American teams, and it was really, really, really funny. I think there's also some other examples of that during, like, player interviews and such. That's fine, okay? That's great, just playing up the role and persona of a bad guy, in between matches and such. But when you're in the middle of a series, let alone the most important series of your entire fucking season, like, guys, that's not on. That is not on whatsoever.
No, I was going to say, you can only be the bad guy if you actually are worth it. If you're actually proving that you are the best, you can actually, like, look down on others. So to have this little complex, it just is not good right now. This is when, and he should be, like you said, talking to his team. That 1 minute break, you can say, yeah, I don't want to be staring at the screen. You're not. You're talking to your team. It's, okay, how can we fix this? Where do we go here? And all of that. So it's just the fact that he is not doing that. And the team is just completely broken, essentially, if they cannot get things together. And it's just such a bad sign. And to be honest, at that sort of rate, it's no surprise that they dropped out this weekend. Sorry, spoilers.
For those of you who wanted to know the information of the results, then, we'll talk about it in more detail in a little bit. But to move on to part 2 of this story, we was going to add this bit as like a discussion. It's like, okay, well, are they going to stick with Greasy going out? Are they going to kick Flakes out just for the sake of the team mentality because of how much of a prick he's been in this respect? But we actually got information about this. Is that Complexity? I keep thinking that they're Method for some reason, but Complexity have actually cancelled all scrims moving forward off the back of the promotion tournament. This doesn't suggest to me that this is going to be a roster move, Bacon. Yep. This might be Complexity as a whole just straight up done. Oh, shit. Just knocking the microphone about.
As the only team from RLCS that got dropped down, I reckon we're going to get another mouth sports situation here, Jay, where they just drop out. These are all players that don't, like, I can probably see Magnus getting picked up by a bigger team because we're expecting another crazy offseason, aren't we? Flakes, who knows? Because if you've got that sort of mentality and that, I don't want to say ego, but that sort of air about you, teams are going to be cautious in maybe picking you up. And then, of course, Greasy with, I don't know, it could be he might get picked up by a team, but I reckon he'll look to go elsewhere because he won't be wanting to stay on this team considering.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, like, I don't think anyone wants to play with Flakes right now. It's just a good thing that he got his sort of like stats on in the promotion tournament, because if he is going to get picked up by anybody, then they're going to want that in return. Based off this, though, like, I'm not sure I'd want to touch Flakes with a barge pole. Even if I was an organization, for example, looking for a new pickup for the Rocket League team, it's like, actually, do you know what? I don't think I like this. I'll be honest with you. I don't think Jason Lake would like this either. Who, obviously, for those of you who don't know, is the CEO or the managing director. I don't know what you call him anymore because he's like not owned by a bunch of different people, but he's sort of the guy who does all the management and stuff. He's the head essentially of Complexity, and he don't like that with his team. There was obviously that famous tweet off the back of Complexity CS:GO getting eliminated from the major in like the first stage, and he made an immediate tweet just like, right, fuck these guys, I'm forming a new team, just straight up and out. It was quoted by B Shadow J, essentially just realigned to the Rocket League's team, which has to be probably my tweet at the moment for the entire promotional tournament, but. Honestly, here's the thing, right? If Jason Lake is seeing this shit, his team has been relegated for a second time, and now they're cancelling scrims. Like, honestly, again, the writing seems to be on the wall for me. Again, it's nothing concrete. You know, for all we know, they could just be taking some time out to try and restructure things, or just take a moment of respite. But to me, if you're looking to make a roster move anyway, like, you wouldn't be cancelling scrims whatsoever. And if you were still going to be a team off the back of this, you would want to be trying to improve as much as is possible. And again, with the likes of discombobulators not being an organization team, plenty of other teams coming up through the scene, as well as I think North America had some teams. Oh yeah, they did some teams did promote, obviously, all promotion this season. So yeah, Complexity have options. This team, however, may have just run theirs up, and I hate to say it, but I think it was all pretty much down to Flakes' own undoing on Twitter, not even in the server. Like, if you were cocky and you were winning, fair play, that's just great character building. But if you're doing this sort of stuff, like, it's not on whatsoever. It may have killed Complexity.
Yeah, lad, like, we just say needs to grow up. That is the short of it, And for me, looking at this, I'd imagine Complexity will drop the oil because they are very harsh. They want the top, performing players. And I reckon, looking at EU, this is going to be a difficult choice. I don't think they'll stay with an EU as an org J. I reckon if they do stay with him Rocket League, they'll probably go over to NA and pick up one of those newly promoted RLRS teams. For me at the moment, the Afterthought side, which has got previous pros, quickly off the top of my head, Dapper, Zafyu, and Shock, I do believe it is. That would be a fantastic pickup for Complexity, And I wouldn't be surprised if they went down that avenue if they were staying within Rocket League. Because right now, you got to think they got hurt in the past when they originally dropped. They kept that, belief in their team, got back up into RLCS, and then instantly fucked it up because the team couldn't keep it. They're probably done with that side because it's just too much hassle for them to really deal with.
Well, the new question to ask us, obviously, is where the hell do they go from here in that respect? Like, the team as a whole. Like, let's assume for a second that this is going to be a this is going to be a lights out moment for the Complexity lineup, and they're actually going to be going and disbanding themselves as a whole. Do we think that there's a future for the likes of Mognus and Greasy, for example? Like, where can Flakes go? Does Snasky have another coach position? This is the reason why I asked this question, because I know that you love to theory craft these kind of roster moves. Easy. And I know you've already done some theory crafting. So go on,
yes.
tell us what your thoughts are for the remainder of
away. It's going to be the choice everyone wants. Remco has said he might be on the way out. Put Mognus back in there. Get the Mets and Mognus duo back. That would be an easy fan favorite and a solid too. Like I said, I reckon Greasy's probably going to retire because it's going to be so hard and, end on a high. Like I say, end on a high, but end whilst on the top team. Flakes, unless there is a big boy play coming out from somewhere, who knows? I don't think he's going to pick up and he's going to have to redo a run in RLRS. And we know him already. Him and an RLRS team, he will smack purely because he's that good. We talked about in the past, Jay, where you do get star players in RLRS teams, but in RLCS, you can't be that star player because you've always got, it's hard to stay on that level of form. And looking at this, the only possible sort of one I could see is maybe if it's a team that thinks they can handle that type of player. And that's a bold move. And I don't think any of the RLCS teams at the moment are willing to take that risk. We know there's going to be a silly off season, but I reckon it's going to be safer picks because of how safe Rocket League is being played at the moment.
Well, what about Greasy then? Because Greasy is a guy that's sort of always managed to find himself on a top tier team for basically his entire career. Essentially, he was there on the on Northern Gaming for season 1, Flipside Tactics for season 2. Obviously, the Team Envy side, which has now transformed into the TSM side, and obviously moving on to be part of this Complexity team, which has had various different up and down style of results. Where do we? Is there a place for him still at the top level? Is the thing I want to sort of think about here. I see you being a little bit confused about that. I'm guessing that's not a sign of confidence on your part.
No, it's not. If Greasy stays in RLCS, it'll probably be as a sub. I'm going to say that now. But I could see spots within RLRS, and I reckon the best place for Greasy would, strangely enough, probably be in place of Burrito B over on Method, We know that's been a problem, and I could see that. You get that experience, which we know does have a massive effect within the RLRS, and I reckon that could be a nice little fit in there, and an interesting trio of Rix Ronde, Greasemeister, and Tadpole. I would like to see that.
Yeah, but you say experience in that team, and it's like, well, Tadpole's already been part of the RLCS. He's even been to Worlds, and more recently than Greasy has as well. So it's like, do they really need more experience in that respect, or is it just a team composition thing that you're thinking of?
I'm thinking the team composition where that would allow Rix to once again become a very heavy striker role. If it's not going to be that, then I do expect one of your more young gun, really aggressive, mechanically skilled players like, Breezy, Blurry, one of those lot to really come through and fill that spot. But for me right now, I reckon Greasy's got to, maybe if he's looking at RLRS teams, look for experience and try and fill a role where he is going to try and educate a team. Like you've got, at the moment, ARG and Baguette Squad alongside Method sitting comfortably in there. Does he try and fill one of those spots? I don't think you'll see that from Baguette Squad being a French roster. ARG, maybe, who knows? I doubt it, just from there doesn't seem to be any connection there. Method, I could see. If it's not that, he goes to RLRS and has to pick up a squad, has to do a Tigre and try and form a whole new team together. And that was a nice situation there because it's almost a leftover and high quality player scenario. But if he doesn't do that, it's got to be coaching for him.
Yeah, I'd say so too. Also, this fun little meme, which you posted as well, Bacon. I really appreciate this. Where did you find this from, actually? Just out of interest. Reddit?
Should I do, where is it? Shout outs to...
Yeah, give shout out to the person who made it.
Tic Tac Peppermint. That's even better. I love that name.
Well, shout out to Tic Tac Peppermint on the Reddits. And of course, if you do have an opinion on this particular topic, where do you think the complexity side would go? Do you think they might backtrack on their original idea? Do you think that maybe we're a little bit wrong in our information, which is being fed red herrings? You never know. We could be done. But regardless, do let us know at RLAfterShock on Twitter. And of course, through the Discord links as usual. So... that's the only real piece of news we got for you today, unfortunately. Bacon, Bacon and I have pretty much secured this, given so many weeks of just sort of trying to fill for news and shit. So this is the only thing that we've got this week. I mean, we could go into the whole blueprint thing, but it's I have no idea what to say on that respect because I don't use the items in Rocket League. It's not really my thing. I'm only interested in the competitive side of it. I've heard some bullshit about it being really crappy pricing and such, but it's I have no experience in that respect. I don't really want to make a comment on something that I've not really, I don't really have any standing to make,
Yeah, exactly that. We're an esports podcast. I know we talk about Rocket League and it's only Rocket League, but that's a different area. I mean, of course, there's going to be new bugs in there. And like we saw, and I like a good meme, and it seems like there's an extra 0 on the end of everything. It seems pricey, but we're not going to give proper opinions in that because that's not what this podcast is about.
Awesome. Well, this podcast is about esports. We're going to talk about some esports things. In particular, we're going to move on to our feature, which is something that's very close to our hearts, Bacon. Obviously, we're casters ourselves, so we love talking about casting. We love casting, obviously, which is the art of talking itself. But for me in particular, I spent 5 years or so doing all this stuff, from Counter-Strike to Rocket League to PUBG to Overwatch. I'm pretty sure there's a 5th game in there somewhere. But I've done a lot of stuff over the course of the last 5 years, made it professional. So whenever the conversation springs up about casters, I always like to try and chime in with my own voice. Here's the problem with talking about casters in Rocket League, though. Whenever you have a differing opinion that's not they're all great, it just gets hounded the fuck down. This week, again, no offense to the guys on the team. I mean, that comes later when I actually criticize you. That was a joke. But the problem with the subreddit, and one of the reasons that I'm very tentative to ever jump in and get involved in conversation on the subreddit is that it's for this specific reason, right? If you were there on the subreddit for the last week or so, there were 2 Reddit threads that went up about casters in the Rocket League, Promotion Tournament, essentially, saying one was it was a bit of a vague statement about the casters themselves. When you clicked on it, it was a really positive sort of it was a really positive sort of thing about how they were doing really well. That one got a net positive of, I can find it real quick. See, I should have been more prepared for this, but yeah, about 100 or so. 100 or so net positive upvotes in total on the subreddit. Prior to that, there was another one that says we need new commentators, essentially. That one got a net 0, which is par for the course for Reddit, I think, because essentially that's what Reddit credits. It credits the idea of having discourse and, or not discourse, what's the word? Convention, is that what I'm thinking of? I don't know. Like, it's like one common mind, essentially, one kind of common mindset, essentially. It's like, if you agree to that mindset, you upvote. If you don't, you downvote. And if your opinion is based on the Reddit and it's not of the right opinion, then you just don't get anywhere. And we never get to discuss these things, essentially. It's part of the reason why I did Aftershock, so that way we can discuss these things in its own little environment without having to, rely on the subreddit sort of upvotes to get us any sort of traction. And that's what I want to do today, because obviously, we've had two Reddit threads come up about like the likes of Stacks and Subi entering the RLCS. We've had a lot of threads over the course of years talking about several casters. Quinn was one of the guys that always springs to mind way back when he got his unpopular sort of level. In the last few weeks as well, we had Lawler get a lot of shit on Twitter about not knowing who the discombobulators were, which was a fun little time, to say the least. Yes. So I think I've wanted to do this for a while. I've just been really skeptical about doing it, obviously, because we all work in the same space as commentators. But I think that the way we will progress and the way we push forward in the scene is to be able to highlight those negatives, not for the sake of being hateful or, really unreasonable at anything, but because those negatives are going to allow us to improve overall. And that's, again, Reddit doesn't seem to see that ever, which is why I hate having conversations there,
Yeah, and it's that case of, like, you can only get better by improving on your weaknesses. You can't just keep bolstering strengths, because those weaknesses will still be there and they can get picked apart. And I mean, we know that definitely from ourselves having to work. Like, casters are always the hardest critic of themselves, purely because they have to go away, and if they want to improve, they've got to watch over hours and hours of themselves. Like, we all hate our own voices, don't we, Jay? That is such a harsh truth.
Look, man, I've been listening to mine for I've been listening to mine for the past 8 years. I've gotten used to it at this point. I still hate it, but it's just like I'm just so reamed out. It's like, yeah, fucking hell, whatever.
But yeah, definitely for me, like, on this topic, the one that highlighted, I think this was one that got the ball rolling for us, was the contrast of love for Stacks and Subi, wasn't it? And I think my favorite thing was someone pointed out that Subi's phrase that he used of the game's done, it's in the fridge, the jelly's jiggling, the milk's
I know
chilling.
that. Hold on.
I fucking love that entire phrase, and I know he picked it up from a famous, I want to say it was an NFL commentator, and people going, oh, it's so stupid, so silly, and you're like, yeah, it's lovely.
I'm actually going to err in agreement on that sort of statement there. Not with you, with the other guys. Here's the thing. Here's my problem with Subi, and I'm going to bring in a little bit of English language sort of like construction right there. There is a little rule that we have, the rule of threes or the rule of fours, that if you're making a point, you use 3 or 4 different points. So in Subi's case, the actual legitimate quote, I say on the subreddit, was, the game's in the refrigerator, the doors are closed, the lights are out, the eggs are cooling, the butter's getting hard, and the jello's jiggling. That's just like so overcooked, essentially.
It's a little
you know what I mean?
overlong, yeah.
If Subi turned around and said, the game's in the refrigerator, the doors are closed, the lights are out, the butter's getting hard, that would be such a really cool fucking moment, I think. If he delivered that in the rule of fours, because that really hits home, because it's some sort of subconscious in the human brain that like attracts itself to the 3 or the 4. 6 is just sort of like, okay, now this is dragging on for a little bit longer. Like, you have to keep points short and concise. I think that Subi's got a lot of great ideas when it comes to casting. It's just that he goes a little bit too overboard. The love for Stacks, though, this is the part where this is going to get really contentious, in my opinion, Bacon, because I'm of the opinion that I do not enjoy Stacks' commentary. And trust me, right, if you think I'm the only one who says that, you should speak to most of the EU audience. Because the problem, my opinion in Stacks is that he is way too he sounds way too phoned in, to be honest, to me.
Yeah.
Like, I understand where his appeal comes from, obviously, because he's got that voice, but his pacing is so set to what seems to be sort of like baseball announcements, essentially, that when it comes to play-by-play commentary, it can feel really stilted and disjointed, which is where I think a lot of people who criticize Stacks, myself included, are coming from when it comes to their experience with a play-by-play commentator, you know?
Yeah, and I definitely agree with that. And it's always been a case of, like, as a commentator, we've said, personally, from an EU audience and that, you get a lot of that from other guys, where you say, personally, I don't enjoy myself Stacks as commentating, but I can respect his craft and he's good at his job. I think there just needs to be a bit of adaptability and knowing when to do it. But this is the thing. He's an RLRS caster. I think that is fine at that level, you know? And it's that case of he's not the top end caster and he's fucking good. And when he was brought on in, of course, to do, can you remember back in Washington, to do the arena announcement?
Yeah, mate. No, seriously. If there was one role I would have Stacks do is to get him on every single major event, have him introduce the team to the stage host. Like that would just work so perfectly. Like I think that his sort of pacing is a little bit too disjointed for play-by-play commentary. Again, I respect why people like him because he has that very North American voice and he has that very American style announcer, sort of like big, booming, professional sounding voice. But for me, like, it's a bit too much. And again, it sounds a bit too phoned in. And again, a lot of Europeans sort of like, a lot of the European audience agree with this. The esports audience as a whole, they're used to sort of play-by-plays flowing from point to point to point. This is why Shogun is heralded so well, because if you ever listen to his commentary, you notice how he transitions pretty much seamlessly from one play to the other, into maybe like a small color point to potentially hand it off to his color commentator partner, or potentially go back into a little bit more play-by-play, a little bit more point, a little bit more of a play. And the North American style as a whole just doesn't seem to have that, you know, like, because a lot of it is very American, essentially. And I'm going to use that phrase a lot because it is the best way to describe it. But the American style is just do this point, maybe a bit of dead air, do this point, bit of dead air. And it's just like, it doesn't really work, in my opinion.
So I'm just liking the squelches between them. But yeah, definitely...
That's the way it sounds to me, though. Like, again, I compare to Counter-Strike, right? And Counter-Strike has some of the most, like, you know, revered commentators in the world, the most revered play-by-plays, you know, the most developed play-by-plays in the world. And again, the most recent winner of the Esports Awards Commentator of the Year was a Counter-Strike commentator, Henry G, actually, a really respectable guy. One of the guys actually that I've had the pleasure and the opportunity to work with, and the way that he sort of, like, you know, connects his points. He's a color caster as well, by the way. So the fact that he can seamlessly blend play-by-play and color together when he absolutely has to is something that I also think is missing from a lot of the championship series casters. Like, you know, because not only does he make those color points and play-by-play points, he has a point to them. Whereas another thing, I'm going to quote Stacks on this one, he was throwing a lot of stats out there in the broadcast that were cool to hear, but it didn't do anything to build the story or the atmosphere of the game itself, which is another thing that I also I think is very underrated. But we'll come to that in a minute, you know.
And I think if you're going to be that type of person, then it comes down to a very specific duo to be able to work. If you're just going to be the one to do very much the hard stats man, then you need that second guy who can bring in the color and the fun. You can see that starting the flow with Subi, but it's not there yet. And as a duo, I quite like them together, but there needs to be that back and forth, and that literally takes years to develop. That takes so much time and so much, I want to say, a lot of friendship and a lot of just getting to know each other and how to flow it. That's not something that you can easily click. And so that pairing has got so much potential. We can't wait for it. But there's just little niggly bits which, as soon as they do click and get in place, like one after the other down the line, oh, it's going to be so good.
Actually, on that point of duos as well, that's something that I also think is very not really respected in the RLCS as a whole. Like, in DreamHack, they actually have that shit down pat. They have it down pat because they actually have solid pairings for each of their broadcasts. Because always when you go on the DreamHack streams, you'll always see Shogun and Johnny being paired together because they know it works, because they know that they've worked together, because they know that if you start breaking up the duos and you start breaking up different casters and having them rotate out and in, then you start to have chemistry issues. That's something that RLCS doesn't do. And it comes to really highlight some of the worst points of some of the casters. And I'm going to call them out here. James and Turtle. That duo doesn't fucking work.
Just keep going. Like, as after last year when everyone shouted it on out from the community, and then that's still going. I don't know what this comes down to? Because we've seen Turtle with Jorby before, and that was a good combo.
Yeah, that worked.
That was fantastic. James, for me, needs to stop doing play-by-play. I'm sorry, dude. Color. You are great on color when you have a hype. You and Jorby, like, actually, fuck it. Anyone with Jorby, okay? Jorby's great. Jorby and Achieves is the best RLCS combo at the moment. I will state that.
That's the thing, right? Going back to the James and Total duo thing. It's like James has already expressed his sort of like desire to do more color commentary, and it's like that would fit really, really well in the context of the RLCS. I think, you know, like if you take a look at sort of like the talent lineups that they have for the championship series and who they've got Total, Wavepunk, Corelli, James, Jorby, and Achieves. So if you were to put like, you know, James with Wavepunk, for example, that would really, really, really work in my opinion. Just as a color commentator put with Wavepunk sort of play-by-play. Turtle, honestly, like I feel like some of the points he makes can be a little bit sort of dry and not really sort of like helpful to add too many like sort of color points to the broadcast as a whole. And I think he's got some real big sort of like presentation issues to work on, in my opinion. I think actually a lot of people that agree with me in saying that he works better on a desk, and I actually would say that he would work better on a desk. If you had to have him in commentary though, like I think we need to stop pairing him with James, because even from like a basic sort of chemistry style, like they've cut each other up so many times on broadcast. All you have to do is watch the promotion tournament and you'll count like 5 or 6 times in the series is where Total makes a point in the middle of James is speaking, or vice versa, when sort of like no one knows who's going to take the microphone, so both casters reach to try like grab dominance over the ears, and it messes up a lot as a result. And again, like duos is something that is so imperative to every single esport in the world. Again, going back to my Counter-Strike comparisons, in the last year, the main sort of duos were Annas and Semler, and the other one was Sadakist and Henry G, for example. And those 2 duos were held as the best 2, alongside James Bardoff and DDK. You know, those 6 individuals paired into those 3 pairings were always together on every single major broadcast, essentially, up until one little switch happened and Moses got swapped out for Semler, at which point it was Annas and Moses together, and now they are together right now. And it's like you only make those changes when they're absolutely necessary, and you just sort of like have to like keep duos together rather than having them cycle out. That's the reason why if you notice on Wikipedia, me and Bacon cast with each other a lot. That's not by coincidence. That's by fucking design. Okay. Up yours, mate. That's by design, because we've worked together for now approaching 2.5, approaching 3 years right now, and we've found a style that works for both of us, and something that we're really, really proud of, and something that tournament organizers themselves have said, actually, this is really, really good. Even to the point where there are some people that believe that we should be on the RLCS, not to toot our own horns, of course, but you know, those are legitimate comments that we've actually had. You know, you can't lie to the public.
Like we're saying, as casters, we know we're own hard criticisms. I need to work on game knowledge a lot more. That has dropped off, because where we've been so busy, I know over the last year, like the meta has changed, and I don't have a deep understanding of meta right now. I will completely go and say that, you know, live on the broadcast, but because to sort of like, I want to say, fix that a little bit for the production standpoint, I've gone more jokey, haven't I, to try and fix that. This is something over the Christmas break I'm going right in depth and, you know, hitting the books, learning everything like that to come back. But that is just, you've got to have something that fixes. So I know from working with Jay for ages, he knows that, and Jay started picking up on a few little bits of color himself, and it's sort of become more hybrid. So that Jay makes the play-by-play and a couple good points and a little bit of analysis. Then I either bring in the analysis or jokes and sort of humor, which keeps it lighthearted, and that works for us. But of course, if you're coming to us, and I can understand, like if you had high-level players watching it, they'd be there like, why are you picking out this point? That's because it's not aimed for high-level players. Our style is very much broad and open to everyone, I find.
Yeah, and I mean, we have our issues over the course of time. Like I've highlighted several points over the last few months where Bacon's cut me off as well, and like, you know, I'm straight with. That's another thing. Like, you know, the working relationship also needs to be there. With me and Bacon, like we're straight as fuck with each other. We have a problem with the broadcast, we call it out immediately. Like we need to engage more. We need to, you know, work on this back and forth. You know, is there an issue that I can work on? Is there an issue that you can work on? Is there something else that we can do as a duo, essentially? And when you sort of break up the pairings and you sort of like have Jorby casting with Achieve one week, and then you have him cast with Turtle the next week, or you have him even between series on the same broadcast, that completely fucks up a whole dynamic. And it's not a caster issue, it's more a broadcaster issue, and that's something that we have to level at the organisers of the RLCS, whether that's NGE or Sarnix themselves. You know, those two are the other guys that we're looking at, just saying that, right, decide who's going to work with who, or let the caster decide who they want to work with, make those pairings based off of who you have on whichever day, essentially, and run with that, essentially. Like, that's what we need to do more than anything else, because I feel like we're missing out on some great opportunities to create some really high-level casting, all for the sake of arbitrary reasons, it feels like, you know?
Yeah, definitely. And this goes, I wouldn't say just across both. Like, RLRS naturally has that a little bit more locked in, but that's only because they have 4 casters and they do 4 matches, so they just, near enough, first pair does the first 2, second pair comes on and does the last 2. That makes sense, and that actually provides a more consistent product for that. But yeah, with the RLCS, it seems a bit of a jumble, and that is our biggest criticism, isn't it?
Yeah, and again, when you compare it to the RLRS, where the casting feels more focused in that respect, you mentioned, you know, in theory, the casting should actually be a lot better on that respect. But I also want to talk about sort of like the lack of inclusion of other casting styles, because whilst I do agree that there are small little nuances in the way that Jorby approaches play-by-play and Waypack approaches play-by-play, and, you know, the other guys and the color casters approach sort of color casting, I will say that I believe that we're missing out on a great opportunity for other casters as well. And I'm going to bring up the EU thing, obviously. Like, I still agree that while Jorby is a solid second place for me as the best caster in Rocket League right now, like, I still think that the way Shogun did things was better. Yeah. You know, with the way that his flow, even when he was so imperfect, he was so perfect at the exact same time in the way that he did things. You know, there's actually there's a little breakdown that I want to do at some point when we when I get some spare time to sort of like break down the This Is Rocket League moment, show how Shogun was not only making mistakes throughout the whole thing, but also how he was also recovering those mistakes and making them, you know, essentially making the perfect call for Rocket League ever. And you could also take this and apply it to any sort of like broadcast in the last year that he's done with DreamHack. And even then, I'd say that Shogun's actually gotten better in terms of those mistakes, you know?
Yeah, I was going to say, big thing here for me, massive fucking props to Shogi for, you know, leaving RLCS, you know, not of his own accord, but that big period of time between doing RLCS and then doing the DreamHacks, and not only, like you said, improving, but most people in those stages get rusty. He seemed to come back into it and was ready and get better. I do not know how the fuck he did that, but massive props to it, because that for me is incredible. Of course, like, I don't want to say similar things to Johnny Boy purely because he runs his own 1v1 tournaments and does that on his own stream, so he's continuously commentating. And don't get me wrong, I've always said it, I prefer Johnny on the desk. I think Johnny is the best analyst on the desk, full stop, no matter what's going on. And I would prefer to see maybe other people. Like, I love Shogun and the Chiefs when they did a couple together in DreamHacks. That was a fantastic duo, just because they were so, like, fun to watch together. But that pairing at the moment is still the strongest, and you've got to think this is a rare occurrence. You know, 3 DreamHacks so far this year is what we've seen in those duos, and we're rating them higher than the guys that get to work together week in, week out in the RLCS.
And that's not just a rarity thing. Like, I personally believe that those guys have such a great back and forth with each other. I agree on the respect that I think that Johnny has a lot of turtle problems in the sense that his voice is not really toned to the idea of sort of like doing color commentary. But I think that, you know, that's something that's not something that you can just sort of, that you have to make barren. And again, this also applies to Turtle, like some basic vocal coaching to make it sound like you're not so bored with the matches. Like, that goes a long, long way. But as well as that, not only the European style, but other styles of commentary as well, because the North American sort of at lower level, the B stream bitches, as I like to call them, from the rival series B stream. Don't worry, we're part of that camp as well, Bacon. Right? Yeah. We're no better. But some of the styles that I've seen from the NA guys as well have also been like really, really respectable and really, really cool. Like, I know a lot of people shout out Dazarin. I really like his style, especially as a color commentator. I think he fits really fucking well.
RLRS. Like,
oh no, yeah, absolutely. Daz, I think is the next North American guy to go up to the RLRS if it happens at all. I mean, obviously, I'd love to see us to be, but that's not going to happen now, is it? And, you know, obviously, like, you know, in the European style as well, it's so varied. You know, obviously mentioned the two of us, obviously, is one of the is the thing that obviously is the easiest comparison point for us to make. But there are other casters as well that have worked really well in the context of that. Crafters has a really great sort of like a Scottish voice that is a bit more hype than Johnny's. We've got Jar of Jam, who I think probably has the best sort of
radio voice there is.
Yeah, the best sort of like, you know, the best Latvian radio voice, I think. As well as that, he's also got some really good game knowledge. Surprisingly good game knowledge for someone who, for a region who I don't think has ever produced any major sort of players, essentially. You know, not only in Rocket League, but also in like most of the other, most other esports as well, you know. And then if you just go through the list as well, Damascus obviously was a staple part of the Elite Series. I'd like to see what he can do as well. Tedder's a former player. Tylacto's a former player as well. I think that Tylacto individually has some improvements to make on, but I think that some of his like sly little like color points also can really work in that context.
So Tylacto is an absolute bag of cats to cast with. I can say that right now. He's got some absolute gems he comes out with, but if you're casting next to him, you just say like, I have no idea what is going to come out of this lad's mouth. You're just doing play-by-play. I've done this from, you know, you're the same thing. You're doing play-by-play commentary, and then he just picks out on a point, and it makes no sense of that thing. You're just like, what the hell? And then he follows it on, and it's like, it's the workings of a crazy person at the start, but then it all comes together in the most beautiful way, and you're like, oh yeah.
Here's the thing, with Tylacto, I'll share a little story about like my commentary running in with Tylacto. Is back in season 7 when we did one of the Rival Series B streams. I think it may have been round 4. It was round 4 actually, because I remember we were talking about whether or not Xenomoon would be able to sort of like recover their position in the league. Yeah. And when he did that, he was telling us that after we did the broadcast, he turned around and said the number of times he tried to stop making Matar jokes because that was the time when that whole situation was going down. Yeah. And I was just there like, right, well, I wish I didn't fucking cast with you. Now you're going to cost me my whole career by association. Like a fucking scene out of the Blizzard Hearthstone tournaments, I swear down. But it was just going to be so funny. But, you know, like, again, I feel like that with his own sort of like, you know, issues in terms of like just sort of like, you know, putting a cap on where you should sort of go with commentary. Like, again, that's nothing that media training can't fix, essentially. And for a lot of the guys, I think that media training could make it work both on the North American side and the European side.
Yeah, and I don't know why that's happened for a lot of things, like just going back to the RLCS. Is there not this training being put in place? Why is that not being put in place? So I can remember right back to the early days, it was always the casters getting together because, you know, they get brought in on, say, Wednesday or Tuesday. They'd then, you know, have to meet up and they would do a bit of training, go over replays themselves and try and improve that. Has that stopped? Like, I just asked this, is it a complacency issue? Could that be a serious problem? Because it does happen. Or is it just that support from the production company where they are getting people in to try and help them, you know, with, say, image and that media, how you present yourself? Has that just gone away? Why, in a lot of sense, why is this not being looked at? Because you got to think, you're looking at the top end of Rocket League right now. This should be the top level product, and this is the image of the esport and the game.
Yeah, and that's the thing for me that annoys me the most is that, you know, again, going back to the point about Lawler and his tweet, he tweeted after Discombobulator is promoted to the RLCS, he tweeted something like, congrats to Discombobulators, I don't know who you are, but and it's like,
and you're an analyst,
dude,
that annoyed me so fucking much.
It's like, look, I respect
like
Lawler.
I
think Lawler's got a great eye for the game, and I think that he could really fit in well as an analyst and as a color commentator, or more as an analyst, to be honest. I think he's really proven himself in the desk in this season. But just like, mate, this is the kind of shit that when I talked about the Baguette squad going over Nordavin back in their qualification run initially, I think 2 seasons ago, I mentioned this on the podcast as well, is that, you know, Gibbs made this mistake. He turned around and said something along the lines of, you know, I predict Nordavin because I don't know who Baguette squad is. Like, if you do that as a Counter-Strike commentator, you are not getting work again at any fucking level. You know, if I was to rock up to a DreamHack Open and do that on a desk, that's me out of the job. That's me done. That's me done for the rest of the DreamHack circuit, essentially. It's like, I can't believe we're not being held to that same sort of standard, because like, it's not that hard to do. You need me and Bacon have our DMs open to anyone who wants to reach out in regards to game knowledge, casting advice, whatever the hell you want. we can't always guarantee we'll respond, but you bet your ass if Gibbs was to come and message me, or Lawler was to come and message me and ask, who do you think are the top sort of runners for this for this season of the RLRS qualifiers, or how do you think discombobulators will fare in the context of the RLCS? We would give our opinions, because we've been following these guys from ever since they were in the bubble scene, essentially. Like, and you don't have to like treat this as a competition, essentially. Like, again, we would be happy to answer those questions. And the fact that none of them actually reached out to get that sort of advice from us in the last qualifying run was really, really, really frustrating. And again, when you tweet out stuff like this, like if this was an open circuit sort of tournament or esports scene, and we had like several different shareholders in the Rocket League circuit, like you would not be getting work from at least 5 out of 6 of them.
And the thing is that also annoys me there is it just comes down to half an hour for EU, half an hour from NA each week, just looking through Liquipedia. Liquipedia is such a fucking goldmine. And
yeah,
everyone states it. And just all you got to do is just go back through like your Nice Cactus. I'm like looking at it right now. So Nice Cactus, you've got the ESC Premier League currently going on. You could even maybe dabble into the Salt Mine that Johnny's doing. There was the Samsung Rocket League by Vertex that just had its first weekly, I think it was, or is it monthly? I can't remember. But yeah, you've got so many little weekly events where these bubble scenes are coming through, and all you got to do is just look through it, write down a couple of notes of names like top, say, 8, and then just have like a little folder or a little, I don't know, spreadsheet that just links up those names, and you can suddenly start seeing patterns of strong players emerging. That is not hard to do, like I said, an hour a week for both sides.
That's the point where you do start looking into demo review and VOD review of those guys, because like that's the point where it's like, okay, when you recognize those patterns, when you recognize who the strong elements are in the bubble scene, when coming up to doing RLRS qualifiers, that's when you look at these guys like, right, okay, these are the guys we need to be watching out for. Let me have a look at their demos. What are they doing special that gives them so much in the bubble scene? That's what we do, essentially, And
I spend half an hour a week. I'm speaking from what I do.
Exactly, and I find time to do that as well. I'm balancing 2 different esports right now. A lot of Counter-Strike work. I'm working up to like 3 days prior to Christmas. On CS:GO stuff. That's my fucking life at the moment, and I still find time to do stuff like like the demo review, like the VOD review, like going over casting, like going over all these things to try and help me improve my game knowledge as a whole. And it's like when an RLCS guy does this, like. It not only does it imply to me that like that he's not done all those things, which I don't know if he has. Obviously, I have no insight in that respect. But not only does it imply that that's the case, it also shits on all the people below him who are doing all the good work. Because again, there are a lot of North American casters out there, and they are doing a shit ton of work to try and see if they can get those spots away from the RLCS, essentially, or the RLCS commentators and guys like Lawler and such.
Yeah, like just saying from a lot of the rival guys, because we got, I would say intimate experience because we've had to work with them a fuck ton, of course. And Jay, you even did a bit of the RLR action because you had to step on in for the B stream this season. When, like we said, you got Dazzering, you got Samuel, you've got Meet and Greek, all those sort of guys. Hunted just coming back in the scene quite recently and has absolutely been stepping up the game. And you're seeing how much effort these guys are putting in and how much work they're doing. And it is day and nights more than the guys ahead of them, and you're just there like you said within CS, that sort of stuff gets noticed. Here, it just seems to go unnoticed, and that is so depressing for me as a caster right now. But like we can live with that because we're on the opposite end of the pond. We're over in EU, so we accept our deal that Psyonix loves NA, all that sort of shit. We can accept that and we work and get what we can, do our hustle. But for those guys which are in NA, I just shed a little tear for them.
Absolutely. Because again, they have the best chance, right? We've got no fucking chance of getting into the rival series, the championship series, even though people want to see us there. And even though we'd absolutely love to go ahead and show what we're made of, because if I got the chance to do the world championship this week, next weekend at fucking Madrid, I would revel in that chance. Like I would be fucking like, motherfucker, let's do this.
You fucking would.
You bet your ass I absolutely would. But it's like, for us, there's no chance because we were in EU. And the Psyonix have showed no interest in getting European commentators, even to the point where the guy that has heralded the most iconic call in all of Rocket League is still not working on the top division. It has been 3 seasons so far, and Shogun's still not back at this stage. And
from what I've been told, that's not like I wouldn't say a problem of his own. He's been trying to get in. It's all these visa issues, which we know in the past. If long-term visas, yeah, they can be a bitch to get a hold of. But if a company puts you down, like we said, and what are you in disgust about?
Sorry, my dad's brought in a cup of tea. I don't think he's had any sugar, so I'm just going to give him a quick text to bring a spoon. I don't have a spoon out on me, actually. Keep up with your point.
Just Brit problems here. But yeah, when he just comes down, like we said in the past, you say this guy's integral to our product, and you can get that through so much easier. And it just seems like the smallest things are out of place with the Silence esports scene. And I don't know if that's from experience problems or just whoever's calling the shots isn't, well informed, or, there's budgetary cuts here and there. It just always seems like there's something to have a problem with, and it's not, on the small scale of things.
Yeah, and again, it's frustrating again because like when we get as many people as we do telling us that we need to be in RLCS, it's like, well, why are we not? And it seems it's all down to like industry politics at that point. And again, it leads to this stuff like complacency that you're mentioning earlier. I think there's a good shout that here's the thing. I have not been excited by RLCS casting since season 5. I have not really been enthralled or engaged by the casters, with the exception maybe of Jorby, I want to say. And obviously with
Jorby and Achieves again.
Yeah, if Jorby and Achieves are paired together for every single match in the RLCS, I'm gonna be fucking complaining, mate.
I'd absolutely be down for that. That'd be fantastic.
Please, mate. We haven't got enough chances to make it into the RLCS as it stands. We don't need to handicap ourselves even more. But again, it's been like that for a little bit of time. And the reason why we talk about this, and the reason why it needs to be something that's brought up, the problem is that this is the forefront of all of Rocket League esports. When people look at this RLCS, they look at the broadcast of the RLCS, and when you do not deliver a on par, on fleek fucking performance, you do not get the best out of the product. You don't get the best out of the broadcast. Like, every little piece needs to be done. Thank you very much. Hang on, can you just give me the spoon real quick so I can... Yeah, you didn't stir it right. Cheers, Dad. Yeah, sorry. Carrying on my point, the bottom line is that when you're not putting your best foot forward, we have to bring these things into conversation, because right now, I don't think that we've got the right sort of, we've got the right elements in place, and we don't think we're making the best use of those elements up until we get these sort of issues addressed. Don't go anywhere. I'm going to give you the spoon back. Okay,
so
that's
anyway,
good.
Let's move on from the current elements to, the previous elements, whatever's sticking, to new elements in the broadcast, Che. As this gone weekend, we had a new man join the analyst desk, which I don't think anyone fucking thought would turn up on that.
Oh no! Okay, right. I'm going to start this one off. So, I absolutely am against the idea of OverZero being on the desk, not because of his abilities as an analyst. I think honestly,
he actually did a good job.
I agree. I think that he did a really good job. Here's the thing. Why is this the guy that we chose to represent on the world stage, on the biggest broadcast in Rocket League? Because he's acted like a bit of a dick to Rocket League over the few years. There was that time we slept in on the RLRS qualifiers when his team got completely screwed because of it. He's transitioned into Fortnite, actively saying that Rocket League is a shit tier esport. I'm not saying that you shouldn't bring these issues up, because honestly, in some cases, in some particular respects, in some of the arguments he makes, I can honestly agree with him. But his professional attitude towards the game has not been that which I think should be represented on the world stage. Yes, I understand he's a former world championship, but he's won one fucking worlds. What's he done since? Pissed off to another game, come back because he's desperate, and acted like a complete jackass to his teammates. That's not the guy I want to see on the desk. His analyst was great. I honestly thought he did a really good job. But I don't... until he's proven to us that he's apologetic about it, I don't see a reason why he should be there.
And at the same time, he's in this situation because, from what we can understand, this all came off the back maybe of Corelli having his issue, with his ear. I think he ruptured his eardrum, was it? Gibbs, of course, went down for this. This must have been Corelli. So this would have been a last-minute fix, or if it wasn't, then I have no idea who made this call over there to bring OverZero on. But you just look at who else could you have brought on in place. why not try and communicate? Like, if you're trying to go for that ex-player sort of scenario, you have got so many different players that are much more relevant that have retired out of Rocket League that you could have gone to. You would have had people, let's say like Gambit or whatever, even them from back in the day. You just, it makes no sense. Why over Zero of all people? It's just, I know.
I mean, look, if he's willing to turn over a new leaf, I'm happy with that. But again, it's the same situation and the issues that I had with Turtle when he first entered the RLCS. Why was he the first port of call? Why not any of the guys that have already proven that they can do broadcasting? The guys that have done the Rival Series, B-Stream stuff? Why are those guys not being brought up?
Why was Quinn not brought back? That's the big one.
That's the thing as well,
maybe not thrown in.
Even if Quinn, I mean, Axetos is more of a host than anything else, but Quinn is the guy that obviously was a color caster and an analyst at the time. So it's like, why is he not even being up for consideration? I know the community hated him towards the end, but like at least he's got broadcast experience. He'll be back for this one fucking stream. People will recognize his Quinn and just be like, oh my god, that's amazing, that's so fucking cool, and they'll just be like, yeah, that's awesome. We got Quinn back for at least it's one stream, but the Quinn fans would absolutely love that and shit. And it's the same issue that I have with Turtle. When he was brought up and when he was called up to the Championship Series streams, why haven't we considered guys like Samuel and Dazrin and all those other guys that have worked their ass off at the low levels and not gotten their opportunity at the high end? Is this guy a former player that has any special sort of thing? Again, I think he did a great job, but I think there were so many people that had to be in front of the line for this role.
I would just instantly look to some of the bigger coaches. You'd be looking towards, say, Fireburner, maybe Sad Junior, someone like that as a better choice. Lefemir, he's not involved in the NA teams. That for me, Left would have probably been the best choice, but I just don't. This is the weirdest choice right now. Like, there are so many good players, like ex-players that might be coaches now or just not involved for this current season, which they could have brought on for that role. And it still just bewilders me, this choice. And like we said, he did a good job. So well done on that over Zero. Like, we're just saying, like, this is not on him as such for his job on the day, but just the whole decision from the production again.
As always, it all comes back to one fucking problem. I'm just saying. Just saying, just add on the issues that we've compiled in the last couple of weeks as well. And you can see a bit of a pattern developing over the course of Rocket League right now. Anyways, one thing I did want to talk about before we end off on this segment, obviously, is to explain our own sort of individual sort of philosophies to casting. Because we're not two shitters that are just casually sort of like just hanging out, doing whatever it is on this podcast. That we actually have a lot of experience. Bacon, you've done a lot of sim racing stuff. I obviously come from a CSGO background. And I wanted to talk about our own individual sort of our own little philosophies on casting, because again, I feel like in order for us to push the industry forward and to push the casting as a whole forward, we need to talk about how we approach commentary. Because again, I've not been enthralled by RLCS casters. I've not been enthralled by any top level commentary ever since season 5. And I think that honestly, some of the lower guys do need to get their opportunities to try and have their hand at a bigger broadcast. Because some of the stuff that we got coming out of the woodwork, it's so fucking good, so fucking good. It reminds me of British music. British music has got shit all going on for it, but if you go down to the local level, such good artists at the moment, so amazing. Grime, punk rock, metal, all these niche genres all have such amazing music. And it's like you take that logic and apply it to casting, it's the exact same thing across the board. So for us two, obviously, we're the only guys that have experience in each other's philosophies and casting. So I kind of want to explain what we kind of do to make the product as best that we possibly can for all the leagues that we work for. So we have this style that I've dubbed 80-10. We've got the North American style, the EU style. I'm going to dub our little style 80-10, essentially. Is that you take 80% of one role, 20% of the other. So me as a play-by-play, I'd be 80% play-by-play. But I also had a little bit of colour in that sort of little aspect. So that way Bacon can sort of work off of that and use that potentially to feed his point of a colour point and use that to build the overall story as a whole. Do you agree with that, Bacon? Or do you think that there's...
I do the exact same when I'm doing play-by-play purely because that's the nature and we copy. And it's something that works. You do that 80% play-by-play, that 20% where you're throwing in color. Some people try and dub it as like hybrid, but that's more like 50-50 and both people doing both jobs. No, the play-by-play is still the sole play-by-play guy near enough, but that 8% and then 20% there to do a little analysis is just to pick out a point. That then allows your color caster to expand upon that, explain why it's so strong, why it's not. If not, you've had a little bit of analysis there. They can just not touch that and bring up another point or say, oh, and this works well with this, and this is why everything is going so strong. Whereas at the moment, like with the NA style as such that we see, it is just do play-by-play and then just off the back, the color caster has to pick out something that's going on the back end, which isn't so obvious, or maybe they do pick something that's obvious, whatever. And it's just very disjointed. There's very little flow to it.
And with that sort of like 20%, you can sort of like feed off the back end. Like one of the common things that we always do, you can pick this out if you ever listen to one of our casters. I'll do a significant amount of play-by-play, and I'll make an offhand mention of like, the defensive here is not really that great, you know, it's just like, I feel like at the moment they're having a lot of pressure put on them, they're not finding a lot of great clears, and I think this is really going to hurt them in the long run. I pass off to Bacon, and he says something like...
Well, that's purely because the boost is all being taken up in the back lines. They're struggling. They're trying to push on out to get that middle boost, Jay. But unfortunately, that's being covered off by the opposition team. Where do they go from here? It's just picking up those small pads, which means they're a little bit slow to rotation and can't break that siege.
You know, and that has a lot of flow, not only between the not only for the play-by-play himself, which I myself also prided myself on sort of like making that play-by-play style work, but also just as a general example of how it goes from commentator to commentator. One of the things that I always do as a play-by-play is I don't just make generic calls. I do not just say it's in the center, it's out to the corner, he's up for the shot, he's taking the... I don't do that unless I have some sort of like background context. So like a lot of the time when a two-man play gets set up, for example, like if two players pass to the backboard, I'm expecting where's the third? He's coming in, he's gone for the shot, or he's not there to be expected. And I use that sort of like element to try and add more around the play-by-play because, you know, any idiot can rock up to a mic and just say, he's in the center, he's at the midfield, in the corner, backboard, shot, goal. It's fucking easy. It's really, really easy. It's making it interesting.
Something you still struggle with is kickoffs and who's winning favour of that. We'll say that, Jay. It's still a problem. And I always have a little giggle with Jay about that up on camera.
He
like,
berates me so
I'm just
bad
saying,
for
like,
it.
oh boy. Nah, you still can't figure out who gets possession of that because naturally, that's one of those things it might go down into, let's say, the blue end of the field. So you're like, oh, orange have got control here. No, because the blue player's going to be able to pick it up and keep possession. So it doesn't really work like that. And it's such a fine little, you've just got to quickly look at who's going to get to the ball first. That sort of deal. And it's just one of those things which is funny, I find.
In fairness, I have not explicitly said that one team has the favour in kickoffs for a while now. So I'm gonna hold my defensive on that front, you know. Like, you know, I've never actually given a specific advantage off the back of kickoffs. I have given an advantage in terms of, you know, where their overall placement, like, you know, placed overall in terms of the whole thing. So I like to think that I've got a little bit better in that respect. But trust me, when these feedback sessions come up, these are this kind of shit that we talk about, you know, between our own little individual duos. And again, I feel like there's a difference in mentality as well with that particular respect, you know, with the way that where, you know, play-by-plays and colours are completely disjointed. We have a flow that rather than just being commentators, I like to think of ourselves as storytellers, you know. A commentator just sits there and makes the calls and gives the colour points and just leaves it at that. A storyteller will build into how important this match is, into all the surroundings around what's going on screen, use that screen sort of like element to tell you, you know, more detail about that, you know, from both a play-by-play and colour perspective. You know, if we're down by 4 goals and it's like elimination point, boys, they're going to need some serious fucking luck to get this shit back together. Like, you know, you use those sort of like little features to place your voice in the right position as well, you know. And there's a whole... we could probably sit here for 2 hours talking about like so many different things, like sentence construction, you know, tone of voice and how you sort of like, you know, structure and use the voice to sort of like convey emotion, not through words, but through, you know, through tone, essentially. Like, you know, there's so much shit that we could talk about here, Bacon, man. And from our own philosophies, like, again, the reason why I want to talk about this is because in the words of Wavepunk himself, he's only good at his job until someone thinks they can come along and do it better. The reason why I'm talking about this is because genuinely and seriously, again, not to toot my own hat, but it is my show, I think we can fucking do it better, all right?
Oh, pretentious as fuck here. But at the same time, yeah, you're pretty much right. It all comes down to that story. Let's say you've got a team that were 4-0 down. Suddenly, go in at the 1 minute mark, a second goal comes in at 45 seconds, or let's say 30 seconds. Statistically, that team is still fucking lost. You know, that you're not getting 2 goals in 30 seconds. Statistically, does happen. Not really going to think. But as a commentator, you can't say, like, you can't just leave it boring and basic. You can't even bring up statistically they're still out. You've got to be there going, they're doing it. The comeback is on. You have to bring that hype.
Not unless it's like a 4-1 down with 3 seconds to go. At that point, the fucking writing's on the wall. You got no say in that call. You got nothing.
I would argue at the 15-second mark. In that case, you're gone. But like we said, like 1 goal difference, and there's 5 seconds on the clock. And, you know, there's just been a goal. They've got 5 seconds to do it. You're there and you're banking. A lot of people, like, this is one thing that always pisses me off, is when chat suddenly goes, oh, bias casting that. You're there like, no, we're just enthusiasts. We're just fans of what is going on. 5 seconds, ties up. Actually, bring it. Let's do it. I just want to insert something in about bias casting as a whole, right? Because I know this is something that people absolutely fucking love to draw casters in. This applies across the board to all casters. It's okay to be biased, right? Because the people that call you biased are also biased in their own right, because they have a team favorite, and chances are they're projecting that bias of their own right onto you. And that's the issue that we find a lot, because, like, trust me, in leading up to the TCS Esports League finals, like, one of the things that I constantly drilled was that I really wanted to see the Coconutters beat Civet Geneva, because that would have been such a great story. That's the reason why I have absolutely no problem with caster bias, because if you get engaged in a story and you try and build that and you're the teller of that story, like, it can give you so much genuine excitement about it. Imagine if the Coconutters did the fucking impossible and ran through all 3 of those matches back to back to back as the lowest seed in the tournament and actually beat the Titans of Swiss Rocket League. That would have been such a great little story. TCS would have loved it. The audience would have loved it. It would have been such an amazing moment, you know, as a whole for all of us. And it's like, yeah, I made my biases clear from day one. I was like, right, Coconutters, I want to see them now. I want to see them win this, because for me, it will be such a satisfying end to a season. And a lot of, like, commentators, when they get caught up on that, like, people say it's biased casting, it's not good casting. No, it's great casting. Because if you're disappointed, that's going to get heard in your voice. And the people who are disappointed with you will also be able to relate to that. It adds a layer of engagement with the audience as a whole, you know? Which the people that don't like that team or whatever can be in the opposite end and say, get fucked. Because that's the way it comes down. You can dislike someone for being biased towards that team. Comes to the next game, there's no bias there. It don't matter, you know? And, like, just from TCS standpoint, you know, I've been that way with UGS since day one. Purely, not really any personal ties to this team, just because I picked that and went, that is the team I'm going to support, and we're telling that as a narrative. That was just all it was based on, because why the fuck not? And this is one thing which hurt me this season with Mouse Sports. Coming into this season, there should have been such a narrative around this team within the EU RLCS. You got to think, they ended last season just surviving, you know, within the bricks, having to play through that demotion, relegation, whatever you want to call it, promotion tournament, and they stay up, and then suddenly go around to DreamHack, make one change, they're hot as shit. Starting this season, there was bigger expectations considering that off-season result. How do you not play upon that result? It's almost like people were expecting them when they got those good results. Oh yeah, that's because they had a good off-season. No, this is RLCS.
Yeah, that's the thing.
You compare it to last season and how much that team's changed. You have to pick that up.
That's another thing we could talk about with the RLCS guys, that they pan a lot of the off-season stuff to it's just off-season. Like, mate, these things matter, you know? Like, I could argue that DreamHack is more important than RLCS from, like, a competitive standpoint, because the format is infinitely better than RLCS Worlds. Like, you know, like, and it's got more opportunities for teams down lower who, of course, have proven themselves and gone on to have very successful careers in the rival series, for example, you know? You know, suck at ASM. But, you know, like, things like that, it's like, you know, like, you have to pay attention to those things. And it sucks that we didn't get the chance to essentially see that sort of play out for the likes of Mouse Sports. Because, again, as you say, they were hot shit. This was supposed to be, like, you know, their season, essentially, to come out of the gate and just, like, you know, smash the shit out of every team in the championship. You know, obviously, that's not how it worked out. But if you build that up, then you could further add to the story of, you know, like, Mouse Sports coming in, great season, you know, started things off. They went, you know, against some decent results, decent opponents, got to the top end of the table, and then fell from grace in 4 consecutive losses that cost them the spot of Worlds. how gut-wrenching can that be, you know, to a mouse sports fan, and to like a general storyline telling thing as well, you know? Like, yeah, they lost to four really good teams. Well, technically three if you count Dignitas as one. But the bottom line is that, you know, all those elements could play so much. I just see those things just not being taken advantage of. It really just sucks, in my opinion. And again, I talk about this stuff because it's really close to my heart. Like, if I was in that world, I would have like a big fucking whiteboard, essentially, like in the green room of the RLCS tower, and just be like, look, we're gonna these are the storylines we could build into. Where do we want to go with this? And have everyone be on the same page.
With you, it looked like the Always Sunny meme, you know, with Charlie there, with all the lines linking up, conspiracy theories going on. I would fucking love that. It'd be brilliant. And that's the sort of thing, you'd be there, like, bring that on stream. Have a board there on stream, like the TV, and he's just, like, Achieves goes over, and from the stats, everything's going to link up like this, and you see him go on a mad one, and everyone's just there like, oh, boy.
Well, Bacon, when I'm finished with this thing over here, which I still can't reveal right now, I'm going to do that. I'm just going to say, fuck it, I'm going to get a massive whiteboard, and we're going to have some fun with that shit. But that's another thing for another day. For now, though, we do want to invite you to share your opinions, not through the discourse and the common sort of, like, you know, hive mind of Reddit. We want you to do it on our Discord. It's !Discord in the Twitch chat if you're not already part of the Discord. If you're listening to the audio version or video version of the podcast, and it's in the show notes and video description, just follow that link to the Discord server. Join the conversation. Also on Twitter at RLAfterShock, where you can share your opinions with us. Follow us for all the information on the next episode of the podcast, which also should be a very spicy one as well. But we're going to conclude with our RLCS caster discussion. And move on to our tournament roundup, which of course this week is going to be the RLCS Promotion Tournament. We've already talked a little bit about the complexity situation, but we'll of course move on to talk about all the rest of the teams that were involved in it. Most notably, Method being relegated back to the Rivals Series, in particular after losing the complexity in that last round place, but Singularity and TSM being the qualified teams for next season. TSM staying up by the skin of their teeth, but Singularity defeating complexity 4-1 at the very last stage of the tournament. So we'll start with Method. You really wanted to see this team move on last week, but I didn't see it happening, and lo and behold, the one consistent element that we agreed that probably would be the most likely outcome has been the actual outcome of the tournament. They are out of another chance to see RLCS. They're going to be in RLRS for like the fifth season. I've lost count. I really have lost count. It's been so fucking ridiculous. But they're back in for another season. And based off the rumors that we heard coming into this promotion tournament and coming into the playoffs, like, it might be the end of Method as an organization in Rocket League.
Yeah, it's not looking good for the guys there at the moment. Well, the lads will stick in RORS, but the org probably ain't looking too kindly on that. And it was such a hard one because we knew, Jay, statistically looking at that, this would be the results. Like, this was going to be the deal. And we didn't want it. We wanted promotion purely because Method are a great org. This team could have had the chances for it, and it's just sad. But we'd be lying to ourselves if there was going to be any other way. I will say, though, that game up against TSM, fuck me, did that get my hopes up. Instantly, I was there, because I was doing the viewing party, you know, and we were just there like, hang on. Oh, boy.
I don't know about it, to be honest. Like, for me, I kind of looked at it, and I sort of, like, I had this feeling it was like, I think they've come into this whole tournament preparing exclusively for TSM. Because if you notice, oh, by the way, this is a great meme that we're going to be showing you right here. This is, I think, also taken from Reddit Bacon, I guess.
Yeah, always from Reddit. Good stuff, Chewy.
Who is it, Chewy? I love Chewy, man. Chewy's fantastic. But yeah, TSM, I think they came into this one against TSM with a lot of preparation, because I noticed a lot of moments in their best of 7 where they were trying to shut down Alpha as much as possible. They always challenged his shots. They had a plan against him and him alone, essentially. Because you notice when I went up against Complexity, they had no bearing to work with in that best of 7. So I think they were really reliant on the idea of, right, we're going to smash TSM and go through to the winners finals, and we're going to beat Singularity as well. I think that's what they planned to do. They just didn't have a plan B in case that shit went wrong. And, well, it went wrong, you know. They're again, like, that's a very one-track mind to have. You can't afford to have that, I think, in the promotion tournament.
But like you said, that just shows that TSM, of course, the other teams within RLCS had that same sort of mindset and knew how to shut TSM down. But here, Method, it shows the potential. And for me, next season, this is going to be an interesting team to see. Even if they're not Method, they go X Method, whatever they want to name themselves, the Flip Floppers, who knows? And like this could be something...
They're not flip-flopping between the RLCS and RLRS anytime soon. I'll tell you that right now, because...
I know. They're flip-flopping from league play and promos. We definitely know that.
Absolutely. You're right about that. I'll tell you that.
Just saying, like, this team, we know that one little change, and we've been calling for it. Unfortunately, it falls on Burrito B. Like, it could be either Burrito B or Rick's Ronde that could make the change here. We call Burrito B purely because there was a couple of panicky moments. And we've seen that throughout the season. Plus, you can just see statistically that Rix is the stronger player, and that change needs to be made. Who knows who will be replacing them? But this team is so close to being RLCS level, isn't it?
I mean, yeah, at the end of the day, I think it comes down to who Tadpole wants to work with. I think he's got all the power in this dynamic, you know.
Unless better be the new captain, yeah.
Unless Rix and Burrito decide that, actually, no, we want to stick together again and screw Tadpole over, in which case that's the dumbest fucking move any player has ever done outside of the complexity move, you know? Like, at this point, you have to see the sign if you're Method right now. You have to take a look at this and say, look, we've been together for the longest time now. We had our great run in Elite Series, but it's kilted off. You know, we've got to try new things. You know, and I feel like the duo as a whole, again, it's gotten stagnant still. I haven't seen many massive improvements. Like, I've seen some improvements from Method as a whole, but a lot of the passing plays sort of came from Tadpole taking these dribbles above sort of like the crossbar and then pinching it back down for someone like Burrito or Rix to strike from, which I thought was a really, really good play, actually. And a really good style to sort of bring in from the Method side. But... again, when they came into this one with a plan to sort of like just only defeat one opponent. When it didn't happen, all the same problems came right back again. And it's got to be a point now where they have to replace someone. I hope that Tadpole has the power in this dynamic to pick up somebody. You know, like you say, maybe Greasy Meister might be a decent opportunity. You know, I'd imagine there'd be some roster moves going down in between now and the next season, which possibly could sort of like, you know, be prominent to the point. You know, of several different squads and players that might want to move on and play with this team, you know, because like, you know, who wouldn't kill to be part of the team that brought you Triple Trouble and Reason Gaming? Like, come on, like, you know, who wouldn't want to be part of that?
And again, it's just hopefully an org will come right. If you ever wanted to pick up, if you're an org and wanted to pick up an RLRS
hey,
team,
complexity, I hope you're listening right now.
and wanted security within RLRS, because you know it's the trouble. Your team can drop out of competitive Rocket League. This is a team that just won't fucking go away. They're here for the long haul. They are the Leech and RLRS, for better or bad. You know, like, they won't drop out, but they won't go up. So, you know, if you're a smaller org, you know, with a reasonable budget that knows how to do a good bit of business, like we thought we saw from Singularity, but I think they might be looking at it now going, oh boy, this was planned next time round, not this time. We're a bit early into RLCS. Who knows? You could pick yourself up a pretty fucking strong team if Method do decide to call it quits on this team.
I'm pretty sure they will. Again, that's what the murmurings have been saying for months now. You know, like, you know, we've been hearing this for ages.
Well, the contracts apparently ended up the end of this year, so the end of December.
Yeah.
So
well, we'll find out then in the next month whether or not Method are going to stick around, whether or not they'll still be here, or whether or not there'll be other things coming down from the boys over on the Method side. But yeah, as it stands right now, they have been unable to qualify for RLCS, which therefore leaves a lot of questions surrounding the future of this lineup again. Will they break apart? Will they move on? Will they just, you know, fall away? Like, what they're going to do, I don't know. Again, it's all just down to what time can tell. A lineup that we're still pretty certain about their future, though, obviously, is complexity. Go on, what are you going to say?
I was just going to say, maybe tinfoil hat time, they move over to NA and secure a spot in the rival series over there, straight through play-ins, and then they get through to RLCS, because, I mean, it looks easier than EU at this point. Big plays. That's not happening, but, you know, fun, stupid little jabs.
Anyway, complexity. Obviously, they lost out to Singularity twice. Which, admittedly, the first time was pretty fucking baller. Like, it looked like it actually may have been a decent competition for Complexity, which actually would have been one of the first times we've seen them have a decent amount of competition in the Championship Series. Sorry for the dig. But yeah, like, you know, with the context of everything looking back, like, I think a lot of things still become clear on regards to how Complexity are sort of playing out at the moment. You know, I think that Singularity had a lot of confidence issues in their first series, but by the second series, those were all gone. And, like, I think the Complexity... Like, they demonstrated a lot of their most common errors in that one. Like, the defensive that just didn't work and an offensive that just didn't strike, essentially. Like, you know, at that point, what can you do? You know, you're shit out of luck, essentially.
Yeah, like you said, there was just no confidence in their own abilities, I would even argue. And it was that first, like, best seven was a little bit of a flip-flopper in the sense of there was a lot of whiffs going on and both teams not expecting those whiffs, so they didn't really strike upon it. But Singularity coming out on top, which, I mean, was such sweet justice, like we said earlier about the Twitter drama, was just, so tasty for that. So, good days.
I mean, I don't know if you're in Flakes' position, then you probably don't feel that. But I digress. I mean, honestly, like, I wouldn't have been surprised. Like, here's the thing. I took a look at this series, and I was taking a look at, like, you know, the drama around sort of Complexity, and I was like, I would not be surprised if they crumbled against Singularity. And that's exactly what they did. You know, they absolutely shit the bed. Like, they actually shit the fucking bed. Like, it was not even close from their part. 4-1 on the board. Most games within a single goal, but, like, all the time, Singularity felt like they had the upper advantage above Complexity, and Complexity just couldn't recover, with the exception of Game 4, which came down to an overtime. But other than that one little, like, you know, blip on the radar, like, Singularity had Complexity's number the whole way through that series. And again, all those same problems.
But like you said, there was just that little etch out, it felt like, for Singularity.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously we can move on to talk about them going into the next season, because they are the third rival series team to promote this season. 3 out of 4, not a bad record, I want to say there, Bacon. But they are the third team promoting into the RLCS, which obviously is a really big thing. Singularity picked up this team, and as we mentioned, you know, from their own sort of like track record in supporting teams in other esports, they're not interested in going for absolute glory. They're not a Complexity. They're not a Dignitas. They're not a TSM that want the best team that they can possibly find. They are a squad they're an organization who like the idea of building up teams and trying to sell them on, and building up players and trying to sell them on later down the road. And the fact that they're in the Championship Series obviously boosts their profile even more. They've made this call at the right time. And with the experience that they have on this roster, like, this is a roster that could potentially outlast, I like to discombobulators, depending on the specifics. But that's a conversation for another day. For now, though, it's big thumbs up from Singularity. They performed so well in the course of the day, like, even to the point where they took TSM down to down to 7 games, you know? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that one against TSM, can we just highlight as well?
I want to highlight, actually, can we leave that for later? Because obviously we've got TSM coming up after this, but I do have a point I want to make about TSM, so let's just stick it exclusively to Singularity.
Okay. But yeah, just Singularity throughout the whole day just showed that they were RLCS ready. They were going up against teams that, yes, might have been bottom, but they were really taking them, again, to Game 7 for both of them, and super close. But for me, this is massive props. I reckon we could see a little bit of a transfer coming from this team. I hope not. But Gods has been working this for ages. He's had such a revitalization towards the start of summer, didn't he? Like, we saw him was playing with the original, like, with Flump Resort here, the previous name for this team, and just went, what the fuck did he do? Is this purely just teamwork? But he was just popping off and finally found mechanical skill. Great. Though we've seen for a while and knew what he was capable of, you know, back to the MCon days, and Crazy and Nolly we saw last season from Zeno Move. This was a team that was coming together we thought would do well, but we did not think would get RLCS. You know, coming into the season, we thought they would be probably in this top 4 point and be pretty good. But they have just excelled, and for me, it doesn't look like an on-the-day performance. This is a team that's grinding and has got passion to fuel them, and I think next season, like, I can't wait to see these guys on the pitch even more.
Absolutely. Like these guys, I'm actually excited to see where they can go from here because much like Flomprazon, not Flomprazon, this is Flomprazon, much like the Discombobulators, I should say, actually, these are guys that have proven their worth, before, obviously, as you mentioned, Noli, part of Xeno Moon, Godsmiller, part of the Nordavind or the Placebo lineup that has now, since become a shadow of its former self, but still being one of the best elements that is still around at this level to this day. For Singularity, obviously, this is a really massive team and a really massive result for them as a whole. For Godsmiller, I know he's been trying for several different seasons to get into the championship series. Obviously, among the placebo sort of camp, he's not always hit the right marks. So the fact that he's found this little team and also found a player that scored the MVP award for this week, I'd say that honestly, I think that Singularity well deserved they're right in this position. And actually, I do want to move on to that real quick. Noli as Player of the Week. Do we agree with this?
I'm happy with it. So for Player of the Week was a bit of a hard choice here. Because I will say, I reckon, and it's such a weird bump, but Remco so finally stepped up. He had put everything behind him and been such a wash player, and then was playing at such a good level this week, to which had to show because we talked about that first game against Method and how Method just made Alpha's life a living hell on the pitch.
Yeah.
Alpha was not comfortable, was out of place, and just could not seem to do anything right. And that's because of the struggle from his opponents. We'll put it down to. Don't know if it was down to pressure or anything else on top, but Remco was able to fill that gap and got them the win there, which was so important. Alpha then going up against Singularity, where Singularity wasn't really focusing on just nullifying Alpha, but was working as a whole team like normal game. You could see that this was a top class match between Solo Mid and Singularity there.
Well,
so
I
would argue it's either Remco or Noli.
Well, actually, I'm glad that you brought that the whole TSM thing back up again, because I think that honestly, Noli, considering that those are the main contenders, honestly, I think that Noli sort of did have a better performance, because for TSM they had Remco performing in the first series and then Metsunaras performing in the second series, in my opinion. So I think that in terms of those two splits versus Noli, who was very consistent for Singularity across all three of their series, I think that he was the right guy to get the call. But I'm glad that you sort of brought up the whole thing about TSM because gives us a great leaping point to sort of talk about this team in the context of this tournament because holy shit, you're right. They actually stepped up around Alpha, and it proved to be so clinical against Method because I legitimately thought that for a little bit, Method were actually going to take down TSM. I obviously, with the whole final couple of games coming in, they could have brought it down to game 7, but Remco was the guy that, and obviously, taking a look at what I saw, they had a game plan against the likes of Alpha. I think that, I think that a lot of people are confused about Alpha being silent on the pitch because I think the Singularity series proved that he wasn't being silent. It was the fact that he was just getting shut down because he had a much better performance against the Singularity side. But it's just that his teammates were stepping up in that first series that gave him the opportunity. He wasn't, I don't think, the top performer in this tournament. I think that might change going forward. Because obviously TSM were up against some, I want to say lower level competition. Method I would not have put above them. Singularity, I think I could have given the opportunity. But I was wholeheartedly expecting that Alpha actually would have been the make or break element for TSM, which pleasantly surprises me again because as you mentioned last week, they started to get their team plays together. They started to get themselves back in form in terms of Remco and Metsunaras' contributions, and both those players stepped up at the right times to allow TSM the opportunity to perform in this tournament. And as a result, they are the top seed going out of this tournament and into the next season of the RLCS.
Yeah, and for me, we know that it was AS Monaco, wasn't it, that was doing the scrims against TSM to try and get that RLCS little combination going on. But I look at this TSM and I feel the only plan they must have had coming into this week was against Complexity. They didn't have any true plan other than playing their own game, up against Method or Singularity, and this was a very interesting one for me. I think they were just trying to play their own style and try and stick to that. If there's demos or whatever, they just solidify that and just play the safest form of Rocket League, and that's how they got it around. They had the plan once they were countered, and I will say this does give me the sign because this is the weakest we have ever seen Alpha play, but that just shows that he's mortal. that he can break under pressure at times. He's not an incredible player 100% of the time. He does have an area which he can struggle with, and that was just panic. He made a couple of bad decisions under that pressure, and that is fine because that means in the off-season they can go away and fix that, and TSM can come back even stronger, which is what they need. Next season would have been another disaster, I reckon, if they would have just easily blew through this bracket, because one, like we said, Remco would have probably said, maybe I stick on this team. Now he might be a little bit like that, and rightfully so. Like we said, he had a standout performance and definitely, I would argue, was the strongest player on TSM this weekend, but that's just because of the role he filled. And this will be an interesting one because they know that they do have to put in an incredible amount of work, and they're just on the cusp of staying in RLCS, which
that's the
gives
thing.
teams the motivation to improve.
Well, that's the thing. It's like, I'm not sure if it does, to be honest. I think, honestly, I think that, honestly, the skin of the teeth sort of, results that Sonomid got in this in this tournament, I think indicates there's some more sort of hard times ahead of them because, I feel like Alpha, he was still performing to his best sort of not to his best sort of thing, but still to a very, very high level. All you have to do is take a look at that game 6. Where between TSM and Method, where Alpha finally was given room to breathe, and he had this ridiculous play from him, and then went straight into game 7 and just powered it out of the fucking court, just bosh, and again, it indicates, and when they did that, obviously Alpha was the guy that was, circumventing his teammates on the TSM side. So, in that respect, I think the TSM, they might have a few more things to work on than you might imply. I think that obviously it's a step in the right direction to see the likes of Remco and Metza step up on the right form. But do we still agree that there needs to be a roster move for TSM to try and strike back?
I would argue yes, purely because the style that the team currently has isn't working, and I think what with TSM being fucking TSM, they'll want a team that is going to Worlds next season. And the current lineup, I can't see doing it. I wish I could be, swayed any other way, but I really don't.
All right, then. I think that sums up pretty well.
Yeah,
it's a harsh thing again. I don't think it changes my opinion either. I still think that they need to make some sort of move in that respect. I mean, the question obviously now becomes a lot more difficult with the case of who do you kick? Is it Metza or Remco?
I reckon it's got to be Remco. His playstyle just does not work with current Rocket League. He changed it up a little bit this weekend, going a little bit more aggressive, being able to be a striker, but that was only to fill that lack of alpha. Once they're working in their normal trio, he did not function well with this group.
Yeah, and I can agree with that one. Again, it's going to be a bit more of a harder sell, obviously, because both players stepped up at crucial moments. So, we'll have to see how well TSM want to take that and how well they'll feel about the whole thing. For right now, though, TSM can be thanking their lucky stars that they stay in this season, and we'll see whether they can do the mouse sports, essentially, of, just jumping back into the RLCS, making one roster move, and smashing the shit out of the off-season before coming back and absolutely bottling it in RLCS Season 9. That is basically...
Again, sorry, on that note, you got to think, they're stepping up, yes, but they're stepping up against what was RLRS teams.
Yeah.
That is the big thing there, so you've got to take that step up with a pinch of salt.
We'll see how much salt they have on that TSM camp in the next season of the Championship Series, because that's the last we're going to see of them this year. Even if the Eagle League tournament is on the way, I'm pretty sure they'll do it the exact same format as they did last season.
Who fucking knows on that?
Who knows? We've got no information on that. We've got no insight.
Who knows on DreamHack next year? At this point.
That's another thing as well.
That was announced already by this time around, so scary.
Well, no information on what's going to happen in the off-season, no information on what's going to happen in the next year, so you definitely want to keep it locked to RLAfterShock, where we will be the first guys, well, not the first guys, but of course the main podcast to break it all down, all the details for you, not break the story, but we'll give you all of our information and all of our opinions going into the next off-season. But until that point, we have to look forward to the World Championship coming up next week. And we will have a special episode for you. Not just special because it will be the preview episode, but it will also be I don't know. Should I reveal it, Bacon? I'll say that it was going to be.
Do it.
No. I'll wait until next week where they get surprised. But if you're a live viewer, I apologize. There will not be a live show next week. But if you're a video viewer, then you will most certainly enjoy what we've got put on for you. Let's put it that way. way, I think, Bacon. I think that's
Wait,
the right
we're
sort of
not
way.
doing it live next week? Oh, because we can't secure. Yep. Okay.
Yeah, we can't secure proper internet, so there's
realised.
not gonna happen. Not a fucking chance in hell. But again, if you enjoy the YouTube versions, then you certainly will enjoy what we've got in store for you next week. But until next week, we're gonna get out of your ears and off your screens. So, Bacon. It's been a slow week, obviously, with the only real main thing going on being the promotion tournament. But next week is where things are going to get really, really hype. We're out in Madrid for a week from Wednesday. So it's going to be I think most of us are out there for a week. I think I'm going home on Monday because I've got shit to do. But the bottom line is still that we've got a fun little week ahead of us going into the championship series, going into the finals live from Spain. It's going to be so fun, Bacon. I think a lot of people are looking forward to it.
Yeah, they definitely are. We can't near enough wait to be there because, of course, naturally we get to meet up with all our friends and that, and of course get to see some good stuff live. I know there's that whole thing about no English commentary within the stadium, but we know that that's only a minor hindrance. The true enthusiasts will be absolutely fine with that and can just get on with it, and deal with the hype. Oh, internet's gone down.
Oh, sorry for those of you watching the video version of this on YouTube, but unfortunately the video has crashed. So on that note, we're going to end. Bacon, any final words before we head off for the show tonight?
Not really. Just, what with the new Battle Pass coming out, it's just near enough ultimized my want for a Rocket League anime. You seen that video? Damn, boy, we need this now. It would be so cool. There's some real Akira shit in there.
Awesome. Well, the stream has come back for the last couple of seconds, obviously. Thank you very much for joining us this week here, and we'll see you back here next week for even more of the Aftershock.